All right, we are live. Welcome everyone to the Mighty Podcast post show. While we're waiting for folks to filter in and join the live stream, I just wanted to give you a little bit of a run of show of what to expect today, what you're gonna hear, all those sorts of things. So if you are joining us right now, you can obviously let us know where you're tuning in from. We always like to know where our community is joining us from, but I'm going to give you a secondary prompt, which is in the comments, let us know what color your mood is right now and a little bit as to why. So while I'm introducing what we'll be talking about, I'd love to see those comments come in. So today, we are going to basically have an extension of the first episode of the Mighty Podcast. If you have not listened to the Mighty Podcast, we're going to put some links in the description or in the comments for you so you can go and listen. You won't miss anything by listening here today, but I would definitely recommend going and listening because you'll get the if you go listen to the first episode that we just released called PTSD and Mental Health During the Pandemic. So today, this is just an extension of that podcast in a lot of ways, but it's live because we want to hear a little bit from the community. We want to hear your feedback, things that we missed talking about this topic, and touch a little bit more on some of the things that we know we missed that we want to cover. So with that being said, I think we have a good handful of people here. So I will start with some introductions. So my name is Ashley. I'm the Director of Video and Events at The Mighty, and I am the host of the first episode of The Mighty Podcast. So get used to getting familiar with my voice. And now I can introduce the fact that we have 3 lovely other Mighty staffers here today who are going to be joining, answering your questions, talking about PTSD and mental health during the pandemic. So let's open things up, and Camera, if you want to start your intro.
Yeah, so I'm Camera. I am the digital media producer here at The Mighty. I am obviously one of the voices on this first episode. The color of my mood, I would say purple, feeling the vibe of my hair. That's where I'm at. But yeah, I'm excited to discuss more about our first episode and really excited to hear from you, the community, what it is that you wanted to hear from us. So yeah, that's who I am. I like hats.
Let's pass it over to Sarah. I see you're unmuted.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah. I'm the editorial director at The Mighty. Really appreciate everyone who's tuning in right now. My color, right, as far as my mood, my color is kind of light blue. I feel kind of like sleepy and chill, hopefully in a good way. So that's all I have to say.
Last but not least, Brittany.
Hey, hi, it's me. I'm Brittany. I'm the associate editor here. I would say that my mood is a flashing yellow, but only because I'm on high alert to make sure my dog doesn't act a fool during this. And we've already failed 3 times. So, I'm like a good flashing yellow, but other than that, I'd say a nice pastel blue, just chilling, happy to be here.
I love it. Thank you all. And thanks everyone in the comments who's joining us. We have a couple people from the UK joining us, which is awesome. Philippines, which is even more awesome. What time is it there is my first question, because I have to imagine it's like super early in the morning. But that being said, let's jump in to get to know us a little bit more with a fun little game. So I'm the only one of the 4 of us who is in the north right now, but the snow is melting here, which is an actual sign of spring, and I'm very excited about that. So I thought it would be really fun to play a little game of this or that, kind of spring self-care edition. So what we have to do is I'm going to give you a prompt, pick one or the other, and if you want to give a little context as to why you picked that, feel free. So the first this or that is, would you rather fill your home with fresh flowers or dried flowers?
Both? Can I pick both?
You can pick both. I will allow it.
I was gonna say, I don't know if we would just jump in. I think at one point I would have thought fresh flowers until actually a a former Mighty staff member, Haley, gifted me this bouquet of these dried flowers. And first of all, I was going to say they don't die because they're already dead, which doesn't sound hopeful, but it's kind of nice for me because they're there forever. You don't have to watch them die. They're kind of like how they're going to be for the rest of your time, which is nice. And I'm not that great at taking care of living plants. So I think dried flowers is actually my answer right now.
I feel that my answer is as always dried flowers. Like I prefer, but honestly, I love getting fresh bouquets. I actually have a bouquet of roses that I got like a week ago that I'm just waiting to be dried so that I can just start hanging them up everywhere, because that is my absolute, like, I try to see like the best way to dry the flowers so that I can just hang them individually. Roses are just like super easy, so they're always like a go-to, but my like second favorite one is actually chamomile flowers. They're really beautiful when they're hung up.
Almost everyone in the comments is saying fresh. I was gonna say dried flowers kind of have like a spooky, dried flowers kind of have like a spooky aesthetic, Ashley, and that seems to be very you. You're definitely like,
I'm wearing my ghost sweater today because it's just on brand for me.
Okay. I think if I have to pick, like I have to pick, I would go with fresh. And the reason I say fresh is because, and it's funny because I actually do have both in my house right now. One of the hobbies that I've been trying to pick up for 6 years, because it's hard for me to pick up any hobby, is definitely just creating bouquets. I'll do it one day, but I still buy enough flowers to kind of start. So I like the idea of seeing, almost of like manipulating, like putting it in light. Does this work? Does that work? Kind of seeing like them be alive and fresh and feeling the energy that comes from that. But then you can still keep them after. So they're dried. So you get best of both worlds. If they're already dried, you can't get them fresh. But if they're fresh, you can get them dried. It's like the squares and rectangles bit, you know?
That's a really good point.
Yes.
I like that. I feel like the idea of fresh flowers is so enticing. However, knowing myself and can barely keep plants alive, the idea of dried does not have to be taking care of flowers and still looks pretty is a really nice aesthetic.
Stacy said dried flowers remind me of funerals. What do you think about that, Ash?
No, I mean, like if my future house doesn't give you like spooky vibes, then I haven't achieved the goals that I'm going for. So the fact that it reminds you of funerals is kind of on theme for what I'm going for. So probably not most people's preferred, but there's a reason that I'm only going to share a house with one other human. So I support your reasoning. I understand it, but it is on brand for me, so it's fine.
That's incredible. Yeah, feel free, of course, to participate at home with us. We have a lot of fresh. I feel like fresh did win in the comments.
Yes, they did.
Well, yeah, we are a fresh crowd. Everyone is fresh. Oh, one of my favorite songs by Kool and the Gang is Fresh. Yes. All right, are we going to our next one?
Yeah, let's go to our next one. Which is, if you had to pick an outside activity, would you pick hiking or having a picnic?
Ooh.
Oh, that's so hard because I like hiking, but I also love eating.
Look, I tried to make these difficult because,
How do
I don't know. That was all. That was
Here, I'll go, because it's a very easy answer for me. I hate exercise. We're going to go with picnic. Why? Picnic blankets are cute. You can bring cute little pastries, and you can I have so many picnic dresses. I have so many picnic headbands. My entire aesthetic is garden tea party. So we're just going to go with picnic because hiking is sweaty, and I'll pass. I'm not from California. I'm sorry. I'll pass.
Andrew said hiking with a picnic. I agree with that. But to be true to myself, it's probably going to end up being hiking. I do love hiking. I like being outside and walking around. And to Brittany's point, there are great places to hike around LA. But like I also, again, like you'd want to eat afterwards. So I think I would still incorporate eating somehow into my hike.
Yeah, for me, it's definitely hiking, and I think it's more definitely than honestly. If the other prompt was tea party, because you just reminded me that's a thing you can do instead of picnics, that would probably be number one. But because it's just straight picnic, it's probably hiking, and it's also because I just as in a couple months ago, moved from Southern California to the Northeast, and I forgot how much I missed forest and like real luscious like greenery everywhere forest, and that is all of the hiking around here. So I'm very excited now that it's actually starting to warm up again. I'm definitely going to take more advantage of all of the forests in the area and go hiking.
I feel that it depends on where I am. If I lived in Utah for like a short period of time, I would choose hiking there every time, because like the scenery, and that's all you can do in Utah is hike. That it's like a requirement, and it's a wonderful requirement. However, now with the pandemic and with my relaxed vibe of I just want to chill, eat on a meadow by my house by a man-made lake, or river, or whatever that is. I like picnics. I would say a picnic tea party or a hike that can turn into we will eventually stop and have picnic. I saw like the person who's like combine. I'm like, I think this is one of those that I would combine for myself.
I wanted to give a shout out to Jasmine's answer, not just because it's my answer. Hike. Jasmine's an amazing mental health advocate and a mighty contributor. So shout out to Jasmine. Thank you for listening.
Yes. All the way. Love that.
Yeah, and I like Melanie's comment here. It's a hard one. Love picnics, but hiking would just give me that lift and connection to nature that I need right now, which is definitely why this is still like it's spring self-care edition, right? Because you don't have to always like what you're going to do to know that it's going to be beneficial for you. So I totally understand that.
Agreed. I think that just kind of feeling like you're going somewhere, and hiking can give you that opportunity. We have a lot of hiking to a spot to have. We have a lot of like people who want to combine the hike and the picnic, doing the hiking. Yes.
All right.
Well,
we have
y'all are
one
hiking.
more here. We have one more this or that to pick from. I think I might know Brittany's answer because she already started to answer it before she even knew what this was. So this last one is how you spend your time, either new hobbies or old favorites.
Ooh, new things. Don't like that. Wow, my Libra is jumping out. Okay. Indecisive. I'm gonna go with this. I want to choose new hobbies because my therapist and I both agree that I should try new things and talk to new people. But I prefer those tried and true methods of I've done this for the past 15 years of my life and I know it makes me happy. So why do I need more things? That's fine. So we'll just, we're going to go with old favorites. I know it's going to get the job done. It's good.
I'm probably going to choose old favorites too, only because this is funny because it does touch a little bit about what we end up talking about in our podcast episode about how the pandemic has kind of changed our motivation and how we change our time. I know what I like to do. I just don't always make the time / have the motivation to do it. And so I think that for me, I don't need to be discovering all these new things that I like to do. I actually need to focus and try to do the things that I know make me happy. So for me, that's like writing and learning and reading and being outside and hiking and biking. It's like I know what I have to do. I just don't always do it. So I feel like I don't want to reinvent the wheel, similar to Brittany, and kind of find motivation to do things that I know I like to do. It's never a lack of not having the interest. It's more just not actually doing. So that's where I think old favorites would be a better option.
Yeah. For me, as much as I like my regular old hobbies, whether it's dancing or writing or laying on the couch listening to ASMR, this pandemic, especially right now, all I've been saying is I need a hobby. I need a new hobby. So I'm going to choose a new hobby because I want to challenge myself, and the idea of doing something new and changing my what life has kind of been right now recently, just kind of changing the pace, changing it up is exciting. I'm like, I could do something else. Yes, please. Let's change it up. Let's get some new scenery. Let's go outside and try a new thing. All the cool kids in my town are roller skating, and like I think I missed out on the opportunity to do that hobby. I think everyone's too good at it now, so I'm trying to find what my next new hobby can be.
Love that. It is never too late. Do you say rollerblading or roller skating?
I think that I'm safer if I rollerblade than skate. As cute as the roller skates are, I think rollerblading would be. I remember how to do that one. The skating I remember not doing so well at. So
fair enough. I think for me, I'm definitely cheating with this answer. Where I have a lot of hobbies. ADHD brain wants me to do everything, so I've tried most things at least once. I think where I'm cheating here is that I want to find new ways to combine like some of my old favorites. So my like love of makeup, my love of like photography and modeling with like filmmaking and like Photoshop graphic design. So I want to find like new ways of combining all of those things together, but they're still all of my old favorite hobbies. So it's definitely kind of cheating, but something new is coming out of it. So I think it's good.
Love that answer.
I like that.
Not cheating.
No.
There's
no
2%.
I mean, it's like I thought of this in part of like the this or that is like those Instagram things, and half the time I circle both anyway, so it's just an extension.
But this or that, just it's always all like just all except for that one where it's like, no, I don't do that one, but everything else, yes.
See, I'm overthinking representation here because I start thinking of technicalities, and that opens up a whole new world where it's like red or blue. Okay, but there's blue, red, and there's red, blue. Have we considered that? Have we considered that?
Have we remembered that purple is the midst of red and blue?
Exactly. Like, what if we go with like a periwinkle? Like, have we considered that? So yeah, that's the thing that always gets me for that reason.
Yeah, two brains making things more complicated than they have to be.
Representation.
I love in the comments we have a lot of new hobbies. I enjoy this like creativity. People are like, new hobbies can I do my old favorites anytime, but I want to learn something new and developing as old things. That's really great, Melanie. Love that.
I'm trying to be like you, Melanie. I'm trying to be like you.
That's fantastic. And gardening for sure. Gardening, that's a hobby that I don't have a garden for. Old favorites, yes. Oh, hey, Kathy. It's good to see you. Wonderful. Oh, yes, we got the old faves. Loving everyone's participation here with what you would like with your this or that. I think that there's a lot of great things. There are other roller skaters. Mariana, are you one of the just challenging like roller skater? Like you've got it all down? Are you a beginner? Or like where are you at? Like would I be able to rollerblade / skate with you is the question. So
that is the real question. I think it's time for us to kind of move into our first kind of section here, where I wanted to just give kind of a little overview of what we talked about in our first podcast episode. Nothing too specific, but just kind of a quick overview. And like for each of us, what is one thing that you want people who listen to that episode to take away, or what's something that, you know, for someone who hasn't listened yet, what do you think might be valuable for them to tune in and listen to? So I can give, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. I think that's something super valuable that people can take away is that, I don't know, growing up, I thought PTSD very specifically only came from one or two very specific things. And I think that's something that episode we all kind of go into is that there is no criteria very specifically for what can give you PTSD. It's so trauma-based. So I think it's very validating. So for the people who are sitting here wondering, well, I went through this traumatic thing, can I really have PTSD from that? I think they can potentially walk away with saying, okay, I feel validated. This can give me PTSD, or have me experience those feelings of, I think that's an easy thing that you can take away from that first episode without a doubt.
Yeah, I think that's great, and I think that that point of validation is really, really important. I know, Brittany, at one point in the episode, you talk about, you know, gatekeeping mental illness, and we're talking about trauma specifically in this case, where, you know, there's that first pressure of like our self-imposed, like what is the self that, you know, am I traumatized enough for this to count? But then there's that secondary layer that, because like there isn't a lot of awareness of all the things that could cause trauma or could cause PTSD, it adds like a second societal layer of this probably isn't traumatic enough, because I also, you know, me as society, I'm society right now, I also don't know what actually traumatizes people or what actually is that. So I think that's such a important.
Something I was going to say is I really like to echo Brittany. I like that we touched on the fact that experiencing trauma is different for everyone, and the kind of things that we thought qualified as like BT trauma, there's actually way more than the kind of typical things you associate with trauma. And we related that to the pandemic. And for me, and this is what I mentioned in the episode, as someone who's kind of like an after reactor who tends to like hold on to things and suppress and then process it like a year later, it was good for me to kind of open my mind to the collective trauma that we're all going through with the pandemic, right? Because I think that for a lot of people, it's like this like weird collective experience that changed all of our lives, but we're also all in survival mode at the same time. And so what I would hope, I guess, is that the episode gives people permission to kind of slow down and reflect and grieve a little bit about how the last year has affected them. And we're still going to have to be patient with ourselves for like years to come as we kind of navigate how the pandemic could have long-lasting, you know, effects on our relationships and our sense of safety and things like that. So I'm glad we were able to touch on that kind of for myself personally, because I don't think I've given myself the space to process the type of experiences and loss that I experienced during the pandemic that I would not have in another time.
Yeah, I think it was really great that we all kind of got to talk about how we cope and kind of validate. I think for anyone who's listening, like there isn't just one way, whether it was before the pandemic or after during the pandemic or after the pandemic, to cope, whether it is that you are more extroverted or introverted in your tendencies, or kind of what you have gone through and how you've processed that. This time has given us that opportunity to do it in unique and different ways, but also you are able to kind of know, like, my coping mechanisms may change. I am able to really figure out what it is that I'm going through. And we're all going through, like you said, Sarah, this kind of collective trauma of the pandemic and what that could have long-term effects with. So I'm happy that we really got to like kind of talk about the different coping mechanisms, like the collective trauma of it, and kind of where we go from here and where we're at. Like, I think everyone needs to know that we're all in this together, and we're all experiencing it differently, and each way is valid and has its own path, and you can do either way. So
yeah, and I kind of want to kind of go off of what you said, Camera, is kind of what I want people to know when they go into this episode. Is what I think is really interesting about talking about it between the four of us is the four of us have extremely different backgrounds when it comes to experiencing trauma. The ways that some of us have are completely different than the ways other ones. So you kind of get this wide berth of experiences, but even so, like, that doesn't exclude all of the other experiences that the four of us don't have. But we kind of come at this and we all kind of come to a lot of the same conclusions, even though our backgrounds are really different. And I think that's such an interesting point of validation there, is like, yeah, we all are feeling this, even if we don't have trauma in our background. It's still this experience through the pandemic has been really traumatic in a lot of different ways.
Yeah, Lori just said something that pretty much sums it up. This is the hardest thing I've ever done.
I think that's so true for so many people right now.
That's the other thing we talked about too, where it's like everyone has struggles anyway. Right? It's not like life was like perfect and cheery before the pandemic. We were all still navigating things and living through things. And the pandemic has really been like, it challenges all of that. And it brings up, just maybe a lot of stuff before you were ready to deal with it. It kind of forces you to test your coping mechanisms in a way they maybe weren't ready to be tested. Anyway, I appreciate you sharing that, Lori, because it's, I think a lot of people feel it that way too.
Yeah, I have to agree. I think it, like, one of the things that I even touch on in the podcast is like my coping mechanisms that I used to deal with my mental health or tackle my mental health, and kind of avoid what my anxiety was, the world, and being able to be around people and being able to kind of immerse myself in experiences that I can't do right now during the pandemic. So I feel this being one of the hardest like things that I've had to go through recently. So.
Yeah, thank you all for sharing this. I think what I want to jump into now is something we didn't touch on in the pandemic. Well, we're in a pandemic, so we're touching on it.
Still happening.
The episode around PTSD at the pandemic, and I really wanted to discuss a little bit this experience of medical PTSD. Mm-hmm. So medical PTSD is, a lot of people who live with chronic illness, a lot of people who, have been in the hospital for one reason or another. A lot of people experience medical PTSD where, the result of that diagnosis, that treatment journey, that experience with their illness causes trauma. And I think I want to extend that to the pandemic now and really talk about some of these, I guess I can call them support systems that are really shaken up because of the nature of the pandemic. And the first thing I actually wanted to talk about was talking about the effect of those people who are actually going to the hospital right now as patients, and they can't have their loved ones there with them. So that's kind of the topic I want to start with everyone here, is talking about, how in the way trauma and that experience of having to be in the hospital alone, how that's going to affect folks in the future and how it affects them in the moment.
Yeah, well, we talked about this a little bit from the perspective of a medical professional. So I'm glad that we're talking about it from the patient perspective too. And when we were talking about medical professionals, the one thing we were talking about is, despite our nurses and doctors being well trained and tough and like resilient, how, essentially being in the kind of environment when they're under source and stressed and dealing with something that they don't know a lot about is going to be a source of trauma they have to deal with. I think similarly, even though hospitals, of course, are always experiencing, death and complications, and it's not like before the pandemic, a hospital was necessarily like this peaceful place, right? Like emergencies happening all the time, but just the scale of it, the lack of resources, and that sense of safety that I think perhaps some people felt before the pandemic is definitely going to be shaken. And I think what you mentioned, Ashley, the extra element of not having your loved ones there, not having, even if a hospital was scary before, at the very least, you could have a support system by your side. You could have people sending you, gifts. You could have visitors, and how it's like not only is the hospital setting like doubly scary, now you actually don't have the physical support system. And I don't know if you guys know anyone. I feel really fortunate that I was not in that situation during this time. I don't know if you guys know anyone who has.
I kind of, yes, no. For me, I do know somebody who had to go to a hospital, and they were there for about, I want to say 5 to 6 days, and no family was allowed in. And for reference, I'm in Florida. So the rates in Florida have been really, high and bad with COVID. We have such a high 65 plus population. So I know someone who has a very, very bad fear of, and a lot of paranoia when it comes to medical professionals and the medical industry in and of itself. And they were stuck in there for a solid month. But I mean, not month. Whew, it wasn't a month, but like, a solid 5 to 6 days by themselves. And it did not help their paranoia. It did not help the ways that they felt about it all, because when you do have family there, when you do have friends there, when you do have your support system, you have an extra set of ears to hear what's happening. But it's so easy, especially in your heightened state, for whatever reason that you're in the hospital, it's so easy to mishear, to not fully understand what is being said. And at that point, it's only you, especially if you're not very tech savvy. So that was not a great experience for the person that I know. And to this day, when the idea of going back to a medical professional comes up, it definitely does deter them a little bit, because now they feel that their paranoia and fear is not that it's not valid, but they feel that it has more hard, concrete roots, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think, a couple of years back, I had to spend time in the hospital to get my thyroid out for thyroid cancer. And I was thinking about that whole experience. And I, at the time was really fortunate that, I had to go 2 separate surgeries. It's just overnight, so it's not as long as it could have been in the hospital. But I had somebody who stayed with me overnight both of those times. And that experience was really traumatic for me with that support system there. So, part 1 here is like, I can only imagine that if I had to go through that alone, how much worse off, and especially like, the long-term effects of like, I'm 6 years down from that now, and I'm still feeling so many of the effects of those visits, in my brain and the way I view the world. And the kind of other side of this is, when I was in that state, I was so vulnerable. Like they kept me on things to make sure that I wasn't hurting too bad. And because of that, I couldn't think clearly. And it was really, really helpful for me to have my support system in the room with me, because they could help. They knew well enough the things that I was looking for, or I could communicate more clearly with them than I could with the nurses about what my needs were at the time. And I was in such a vulnerable space that I don't know if I would have been able to get all of the help that I actually needed, because I wasn't, able to communicate clearly. So I really, like, I put my heart out there to anybody who has to be in a hospital stay, whether it's because of like COVID directly or because of some other condition that you're dealing with. Like, there's so many factors that go into making a hospital stay bearable, and I know right now it's just so hard.
Yeah. I never thought about that, Ash. That idea of not having anyone to advocate for you. It's a really important point.
Yeah, I can't imagine, like, right now it's a harder time. Like, the people who I've known who've been to the hospital, whether it's for COVID or for other things, they'll post about it or talk about it after the fact, and it just seems like it's a very intense thing to feel like you are alone, and that it is kind of this place where you can't have that support system that would be like the one thing when you are going to the hospital and feeling like that kind of insecure feel to have, and not being able to have that. I'm just curious of how that's going to be a different type of medical PTSD for the future, and how we're going to tackle that. We have a few good comments I wanted to kind of bring up before we moved on. One about like finding the challenges each day. Melanie kind of was talking about, I find it hard is the challenges each day it brings of how hard I have to work to control my mental health. It is a constant battle, and when I'm so glad I continue to fight. Then we have this pandemic thrown into the mix, and we can't always use our normal coping mechanisms or strategies. I highly relate to that. I think that's a really important point of how our mental health, whether it's in the hospital, whether it's in just the regular or day-to-day, and when we go back into the real world, how that is going to affect us. And also with complex PTSD, Mariana was saying, my psychiatrist said that my severe anxiety is mainly caused by complex PTSD, and that leads me to having social anxiety. My second psychologist said it got worse when the pandemic begins and is still here.
Oh, I want to talk about this comment that just came in. I'm going to pull it up. Having a baby in the pandemic is worse. My sister had a baby last May, And I know, I mean, she was disappointed that like her baby shower got canceled, but she was more like upset by the fact that we couldn't have those moments in the hospital that you tend to. It's her first baby, and she was really looking forward to like my parents going and visiting in the hospital when he was first born, and a lot of it was really clinical. She was really fortunate that her hospital allowed her husband to go in, but I know that were a lot of hospitals, I'm not sure how it is now, that weren't even letting the spouse or the partner join as well. And it takes a lot of the, you know, joy for a lot of people out of that experiences, because it's kind of like blanketed in fear and yeah. So totally, yeah.
And then Lori was talking about, I also condolences for what you have gone through. I have lost my eye doctor, 2 friends, and a third friend I've known over 50 years is on a ventilator for over a month. And now I think she had a stroke. She's been induced into a coma, and there's nothing they're doing has helped. I think that that's a really rough thing to have to be going through, like, especially right now. And not feeling like you can be there for your friends and your family and your like comrades when they're going through this. Like we don't really know what we can do.
Yeah, and that's a great segue, because I did want to talk about the other side of this as well, because this is actually a little bit of a continuation of a point that Sarah made in the podcast, where she was talking about the what ifs of this collective trauma of like, what if somebody is in the hospital, or somebody does get sick, or someone does pass away and I can't be there. So I want to flip this first question on its head and go, what about the impact of loved ones not being able to see people who are in the hospital or are getting treatment, and maybe that, you know, worst case scenario, that person passes away and you weren't there for those moments. I think there's something very, very important to talk about with the trauma associated with that.
We've had a few good, pretty amazing contributor pieces about this. So from people from both, and this is actually what's interesting about it, from folks who both lost a loved one to COVID, but also just lost a loved one in general during this pandemic. And the story that comes to mind is, and I wish I could remember the author's name, maybe I can drop in the comments, is a woman who never really thought that she needed the kind of ceremony of a funeral to like properly grieve. It was her grandma who died, until it was taken away from her, and realizing that, oh wow, like these things that we do, the way we come together, the kind of rituals that we have around death, are actually really important. And so I think that no matter how your loved one died, to have those kind of basic things that you're typically able to do taken away from you, it just makes grieving more complex. And I think that's going to be something that we see a lot, where grief itself is like awful and is like a hard journey, and grief without the same social support, grief without the same kind of, again, these kind of things we do that represent closure in our cultures and in other cultures too, right? Funerals, you know, like Jewish traditions, there's certain things that you do when you can't do those types of things. I think it's going to make grieving a little more complicated for people. So that was the first thing that came to mind when you said that, Ash. This idea of those important parts of our culture kind of being taken away from us for how we typically deal with death.
Yeah, Melanie in the comments, but I've seen so many people struggling because they can't be there for family and friends who are in the hospital. It's very hard feeling helpless and not being able to be there. And I can see the future of this when we're in a post-pandemic world where somebody does get sick or someone does, you know, get ill, that it's going to bring up a lot of these feelings of like that are coming up right now if you're experiencing the same thing of like, I'm not there, like I should be there, or, you know, I think it's just going to make that, like you said, that grief experience a lot more complex and a little harder to unravel.
Yeah, and I think just to just to say this too, I think that just means that we have to support each other, right? Like, I think that like a lot of when I'm trying to think of like the antidote to a lot of these hardships, a lot of it's going to be time, but a lot of it's going to be just like being much more patient and gracious with each other as we move through this together. And I think we might have touched on this during the podcast too, but it's like not only so it's harder that you can't be there for your friend who has a family member who's in the hospital, it's also harder to support each other because we're all going through everything at once. So that's another kind of, I think, a challenge that we have that awaits us, is how we all support each other as we're still navigating all of the lingering trauma and grief and things like that.
Yeah. And I think if anything, it's a time where we can maybe bring more awareness to like PTSD and to the collective trauma that we're going to have to face after the fact. And hopefully also we can talk about medical PTSD, that the different term, in a new way, especially with not being able to see people. Like if you've already gone through a traumatic experience in the hospital and not having a support system to even be there for you, I can imagine that would be a rough thing to go through. And I just wanted to like highlight one of our Mighty community members, Lauren Rodriguez. She posted that thank you so much for bringing up medical PTSD. You struggle with it yourself and find it being in the doctor's office normally, but especially right now, very triggering and unsafe, obviously because of the virus, but also due to trauma, anesthesia induction I went through as a child and teen without any support, as well as enduring multiple eye surgeries. Multiple eye surgeries. I just want to validate and be like, yeah, you've gone through a lot of things, and like consensual virtual hug, like that's a lot to have to go through. And if you are having to be in the hospital again right now during COVID, that doesn't make it any better. So just we're here with you. So yeah, thank you so much for sharing.
Cool. Then I think I want to give just the opportunity here, if anyone has any questions that they want to ask us about the podcast in general, about the first episode, about anything we touched here today, feel free to put them in the comments and we'll try to get to them before we wrap today. But kind of on this note of support, I think, let's jump into a self-care corner here, kind of bookending it with some self-care here of, we're talking about support, we're talking about things that we need to do for ourselves and others. So what does self-care look like for you this weekend? And I know we had some what did we call them? Like the wrong answers in the podcast. There is no wrong answers to self-care as long as it's filling you.
Sorry, I wanted to bring up your Gremlin Fridays. That was like something that I wanted to give a shout out to, but I guess we'll have to listen to the podcast to hear about Ashley's Fridays.
Look, I ended up doing a live stream on Friday, so my couch gremlinness didn't apply today anyway. Well, it probably will after this. Like I'm probably jumping offline, eating a pound of hot wings, and then laying on the couch. So yeah.
I have something quickly, hope maybe interesting to share. I've been wanting to do this for a while, and I think I'm actually going to try. So I haven't celebrated a Shabbat since I was younger, because when I moved away from home, I haven't really been great at keeping up with a lot of Jewish traditions I used to celebrate when I was younger and living with my parents and seeing my grandparents and things like that. But I've been doing some research about just like more reform ways to think about Shabbat, which is, if anyone doesn't know, it's like the Jewish day of rest, where if you are more Orthodox, you don't use any electricity, you don't drive, you don't do any work. There's like very specific rules about, like, you can't switch a light switch, but what you can or cannot do. And I've been reading about it in the spirit of trying to create my own form of Shabbat. And so for me, I think it's going to look like starting from sundown tonight till tomorrow, really like chilling out with my screen time. That was something I talked about during the podcast, where I've been like a dopamine fiend in terms of just like TV. just like always having something in the background. It's so comforting, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I kind of, in the spirit of Shabbat, in the spirit of, first of all, not working, but then also not kind of just like, using electronics all day and staring at a screen like I do. I actually think I'm going to try this weekend to have a less tech Shabbat Saturday. And I'll see what that means for me when I actually have to challenge myself to do things without relying on TV. So that's what I'll share. We'll see how it goes. I'll keep everyone updated.
That's great.
I hope that at the minimal, if you don't fully keep up with that, you at least do not work, Sarah. Please, please.
That is the minimum standard of no opening my emails, no working. Thank you, Ashley.
I know you well enough that I feel like I need to like pile on there and go like, Sarah, like minimum don't work. Like the rest great, absolutely, but minimum don't work.
I appreciate that much.
I can relate so hard with the screen time. I feel like all we do is like when we work, we're on our computers, we're looking at a screen, we're writing on a screen, we're on a Zoom call, we're on a StreamYard live, we're looking at ourselves. Like half the time we have to look at ourselves, or we're like sitting editing something or we're on our phones and then we relax watching videos on our phone or watching a movie. It gets to the point where we just completely exhaust ourselves and then exhaust ourselves within rest. And that's something I completely agree. I'm like, I should probably have some less screen time. This week I felt like my body's like, I don't want to look.
Parent yourself. You have to be like, okay, Sarah, no screen time until like eat your vegetables first and do your homework. Like that's like literally what I have to do.
See, it's funny. I maybe a month or two ago, because I was the person who I always felt like I had to be on my phone, not because I wanted to be, but because especially earlier in the pandemic, everybody was having a different crisis every day. And during the first part of the pandemic, I was actually very stable. I want to say up until June, July. So that's March to June, July. I was stable. I was cool. I'm not going to lie. I was really content staying in my little apartment bubble because I'm like, nothing bad can happen to me here. So I was so good. But the problem was that nobody else around me was, which is completely understandable. So I was the stable friend doing at least 7 to 8 plus hours a day of community care. And even when my world got turned upside down, I would still have people reach out to me the day after some really bad things happened, with crises of the week. So I went through this period where I was like, okay, I don't want to talk to nobody. And I'm still kind of there. I don't want to talk to nobody. But then it shifted into, okay, I can talk to some people. And then it's like, I can talk to everybody when I want to talk to you. So not in a toxic, I'm just ignoring people to ignore people way, but I'm learning that it doesn't make me a bad person to have my phone off throughout the day and do other things and come back and answer when I have the capacity and space to do it. And that has been my give and take with screen time, which is amazing. I recommend that to everybody.
Yeah, I think there's something too in there about how boundaries feel like really, really difficult, but it's honestly the other way around is like when you don't put boundaries is when like you find yourself in not being able, like overwhelmed, not able to actually do anything well. So like that to me is just like why boundaries are so valuable. It's like, okay, put the phone down. This is my boundary of till I'm like ready to engage again. So I think that is such a good self-care tool.
Yeah.
What are you all up to this weekend?
Laundry, cleaning, editing more.
Sometimes laundry and cleaning can be self-care. Depending on
movie
how
night
underwear you have left.
Like see if I can get through another Zoom movie night. I just like looking at a screen is a lot. For me, I think self-care is just going to be like taking the time, like doing some laundry, doing some cleaning, restocking on what I need, making sure that I have food for the week that is like going to sustain me. And just getting ready for the rest of the week and working on some personal projects. I think I've taken so much time, like to make sure that I'll do some work on the weekend if I want to for myself. And sometimes I don't really let myself because I'm like, oh, I'm not supposed to be working on that. So I think being able to let myself be creative again outside of work.
That's great, actually.
Yeah.
I'm baking.
Yay.
Finally gonna do it. Said I was gonna do it last week. Did not do it. But this week, I'm ready.
You can do it.
My dad baked all the cookies in the house today because they were all from Christmas and they were about to expire. So there's like dozens of cookies downstairs right now. Self-care for me this weekend is I started a new medication a couple weeks ago, and I definitely, as I adjusted to it, was having a lot of lows. And I had like a good probably 2 weeks straight where like getting out of bed was the most I could do most days. And just the fact that I was able to log onto the computer, I was impressed with myself. So I'm like, I feel myself kind of coming out of that now. I feel a lot more, I don't want to say up, but like very neutral, which I think is like honestly better than just like not feeling anything, which is most of the time what I'm feeling when I'm in that place. So I decided to treat myself, and I'm going to get my hair done tomorrow. And play Animal Crossing the whole time because it's going to be a long appointment. So I'm very excited for that. And I'm forcing myself to socialize because I know one of the reasons that I was staying is because I had to isolate, pull back. So I'm forcing myself to socialize tomorrow for a little while so that I get a little bit of that recharging that I do need, that I don't want to admit that I need because I would absolutely like to spend most of my time by myself, but I acknowledge that I need a little bit of friendship time to recharge. So that's my plan.
That's great. I love that you're like treating yourself and you have like the plan. You've got like, okay, I'm gonna be doing Animal Crossing. I'm taking my hair. I know how long that's gonna take, and I'm gonna incorporate some healthy socialization because no one is just one way or the other. It's not like, oh, I just recharge at night all the time or on my own all the time or just with people all the time. Like even if you're an introvert, extrovert, ambivert, every piece of it's important. So yeah.
So 2021 so far has been like trying to remember that I need to socialize just enough to like, I can stay in my hermit hole like 90% of the time, but if I do it 100% of the time, I'm just like super sad. So it's like catching myself when I need that 10% of socialization.
I feel that. I want to see a little bit in the comments like what everyone else's self-care is going to be looking like for this weekend, or what self-care looks like to you that you would be wanting to do. Jasmine, self-care this weekend is DoorDash. Yes. Oh, I love a good, like when you're like, you know what, tonight's the night, food is going to be delivered to me. I'm going to sit here and the food will come and I will receive it. And I'm doing that.
Not thinking about dinner is like self-care in itself, right? If I don't have to think about my next meal, that's great. Like
anytime lunch or dinner comes around, I get so anxious and like, oh no, I have to cook something. I have to make something. Why? Oh, what am I going to do? And DoorDash, obviously we can't always do that, but when you choose to, that is I feel like a wonderful thing of self-care. Like Jasmine, I appreciate that.
I feel like if you have some kind of condition, you should be able to get like a month free or like a certain number of meals that you can just get on DoorDash, because I don't know what my depression slumps would be if it weren't for DoorDash and Wingstop. That's not sponsored. So I'm just, that's my opinion. That's my great idea. So,
I love this idea.
I love that.
+1.
Depression.
Hello from Greece. Oh my word, that would be when the pandemic is over, I would love to go to Greece. I'm curious, like, let us know what it's like in Greece right now, and what your self-care is like in Greece. I'm very curious. Self-care for Lori. Self-care, I'm learning to take care of myself. When is the first I've never thought of myself. Oh, when this first I started, I never thought of myself. I've been so depressed over this whole thing, and I'm afraid if I get it, I will die. Like, I feel like if you're like severe, like in the range of like, that you're severe to COVID, that can be even more stressful because you feel like you have to be even tighter and feel like you have to like be on your own. And I want to say, like, sending you virtual consensual hug and knowing that, yeah, it's valid. Like, it's great that you understand that self-care, like that you are taking care of yourself in this time and finding out what that is for you, Lori. It's very important.
I'm gonna shout out Rudy's
yes
comment about petting a dog tonight, because
yes.
if you can pet a dog tonight, that's gonna be my like real final takeaway here. Go pet a dog tonight if you can.
Yes.
It's great. It's great self-care. I'm gonna go pet my dog immediately when I'm done here. So
oh yes, pet care. We love pet care. I can say that. Oh, I mean, Lauren, I agree. Listening to favorite music, watching a few favorite Disney movies, and doing a lot of reading. Oh, just getting enveloped into like the story, the music, the movie, the read, the book. Yes, since I'm blind, I use screen reader, and most of my reading is done on my computer. Nice. And my favorite at-home hobby is spending time with my sweet cat, Raja. Oh, yes. I think I remember you were at one of our Zoom events this week, and you talked about, like, we just were all enticed by your cat. We wanted to know everything about Raja. So that's.
Is that Raja as in Aladdin Raja? Disney fan, maybe?
I think so.
We're gonna make that
I think
I'm guessing.
Oh, yeah, I remember her saying that, but I don't want to like say that is what it is from my memory
Let
of
us
that.
know.
But I think that's
comment.
wonderful.
Tell us.
I love that. I want to thank you for being out there and helping us know that we're not alone. Thank you, Lori. Yeah, you're not alone. We are here for you. So Mighty is here for you. We've got this community where this is what we're here for, is to support each other, whether we're in a pandemic or not. Like, mental health is still going to be here when the pandemic's over, and it'll be here when it's here now too. So
that's correct.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think we got to wrap things up, unfortunately. It was lovely spending time with everyone today. I do want to direct folks, if you want to, first of all, we have a podcast community on the Mighty, Podcast Peeps, where you can give us episode ideas. You can let us know what guests you want to see. You can connect and tell us what we've missed in our episodes, anything like that. You can also talk about non-Mighty podcasts in there too. So if you're a podcast fan, this is the community for you. So that's link number one. Link number two is I want to give you guys the links to the podcast episode. Right now we're on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Let us know in the podcast community if you want to see us on different platforms than those, but those are our main two right now. But you can listen to the first episode right now, and we should have a second one coming your way soon. So just be on the lookout. And anything else that anyone wants to share before we sign off today?
Oh, yeah, just wanting everyone here to go listen to the podcast if you haven't already. And yeah, we have a few more episodes recorded and ones that we are in the midst of recording. So we're really excited. Go to that podcast community if you want to talk about what other ideas and topics you want to hear. Go, there's a question there that I put to see. We are writing every one of them down and seeing when we can kind of tackle them, at obviously within reason, but we want to hear from you. And also, yeah, you don't have to just talk about our podcast. You can talk about whatever podcast makes you happy. There will be prompts about other podcasts and not just the Mighty, but we're just happy to have you in our little community there. So
Brittany, Sarah, any final thoughts from you?
Have fun petting a dog. That sounds like fun. If you want one, you can have mine. Oh, they're speaking.
Aw. I feel like I'm the only one who doesn't have a dog.
There's a puppy. You can hear the Cooper puppy.
I'll go put my neighbor's dog.
That was funny. I was just gonna say, camera got to it first and said it more eloquently, just giving us feedback and letting us know what you want us to talk about. Appreciate all of the comments, and yeah, I'm just excited to have a new way to connect with the Mighty's community. That's kind of what makes me most excited about this. So yeah, appreciate. And I also want to say this is maybe inappropriate, but I do want to say that Ashley and Camera have really been the drivers behind this podcast. Me and Brittany are here mostly as guests. We just get to kind of show up, and I want to give a shout out to Ashley and Camera for really making this happen.
Yeah, it wouldn't be what it is without them. My main talent in life is just talking, but they do something with it. So if that doesn't like showcase their skill set and management, I don't know what does.
We wouldn't be able to do this without the wonderful team that we have at the Mighty, and having like Brittany and Sarah on episodes, and I mean having other voices, and also I'm more of a behind the scenes person, so it's nice to be able to kind of share and also just have a great team behind you. So thank you both for saying that. But yeah, I think that we wouldn't be able to do this without having such a wonderful team to work with. Yeah, Ashley, we wouldn't be able to do this without Ashley.
Yeah. I appreciate the compliments, but I'm going to redirect this too. This is really just a sneaky excuse as to like, I like performing, and this is kind of a way to do that. So it was really just like, I really just put myself in there so that I could do this. So, but no, I thank you for the compliments. I really appreciate it. It's been a very long journey to get it live, and I'm happy that we have, but I'm more excited to see like what comes out of it moving forward.
Yes, but thank you all for commenting on the live, and for like, thank you so much. You rock, and Rudy, you rock. Like, this is wonderful. And yeah, I love seeing all the comments and people are excited about the podcast and want to do different topics on the podcast and just see what avenues we can do there. And I'm just really excited to help produce them and get them out there. So yeah, keep letting us know. Join the podcast community, subscribe, follow the podcast, wherever you listen, just podcast it. I'm going to give another link right here. So yeah, follow the Mighty's podcast on Apple and Spotify.
Really spam it in your face,
podcast?
Yes.
You have a podcast?
No idea.
What? Wow. Is that what this is?
It's the first time Brittany's hearing about this podcast.
I thought we were just here to bond. Whoa.
It's a little bit of both, right? It's like forced friendship, right? But also
That's right.
to put out there. So
and everyone in my
let's fun now for the community.
All right, everyone. Thank you again for joining us today. We hope to hear from you, and if we don't see you again soon, which I'm sure we will, have a great weekend, have a great Friday night, and stay mighty, everyone.
Stay mighty and listen to the Mighty podcast.
Which we have.
Rate us on Apple.